Several years ago, I was asked an interesting question. The question was, Shane, if you could give one statement to our younger generation, to this generation that God is raising up as potential Christian leaders, if you could give them one message, what would it be? And at the time, I gave an answer that I'm not sure I fully understood the importance of it. But as, the 21st century continues to march on, as we've endured political upheaval and pandemics, and I've begun to realize that the statement I made several years ago is far more potent than I ever imagined. For I thought about it a couple of moments, and then this is what I said to the questioner. I said, what I would tell our younger generation is this: you must remember, always, you must remember that every day you wake up, you are stepping onto a battlefield. You're stepping on to a battlefield, and there is a battle that is raging, and there is a war that is ongoing, and the enemy would love nothing better than for you to forget there is a war, to take a nap under a tree on the battlefield. If I could tell the younger generation one thing, it's that every single morning you wake up and you step foot out onto a battlefield. Now, some people, they tend to really get the battlefield motif, but then they forget who the enemy is. And they start attacking their fellow Christians, or they start attacking people across the political aisle. They start attacking people that they don't agree with. And if I am the enemy, if I am Satan, then you falling asleep on the battlefield, or you misdiagnosing who the true enemy is, both extremes do my bidding. Both extremes help my team to become victorious. This thought came into my mind today as I was reading 1 Peter. 1 Peter chapter 5. 1 Peter is one of those books that I feel like a lot of times we neglect. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because it's shorter. It's not because it is absent of powerful images. It's not because it's absent of good, incredible, Christ-centered teaching. But 1 Peter we tend to overlook. However, at the very end of his book, he is speaking to the elders, to the leaders, to the people that are in charge and entrusted with God's bride. He says in verse 1, he says, "To the elders among you, I appeal as a fellow elder and a witness of Christ's sufferings, who also will share in the glory to be revealed." And then he gives them this command, verse 2, "Be shepherds." Can I just say, if you are called to shepherd God's people, to be a teacher or a leader or a preacher or somebody that disciples other people, can I just say, all good shepherds smell like their sheep. All good shepherds spend so much of their time and so much of their energy invested in being in the lives of the sheep that naturally they begin to have the scent of the sheep on them. And Paul commands the elders, be good shepherds. Be good shepherds of God's flock that is under your care, watching over them. Not because you must, but because you are willing, because you have chosen it, and because God has chosen you as God wants you to be. Not pursuing dishonest gain, but eager to serve. Not lording it over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. Jesus was called our good shepherd in John's gospel. And one of the ways in which he demonstrated what a good shepherd actually was is he says a good shepherd is willing to lay his life down for his sheep. He says that a good shepherd, a sheep, should know the voice of the shepherd because they have such a deep intimacy. And here in 1 Peter 5, he's using the same imagery. He's using the same images in order to exhort these leaders, these elders, these caretakers of God's people to be like Jesus. Verse 4, "And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that will never fade away. In the same way, You who are younger, submit yourselves to your elders. So he talks about the ones that are entrusted, the leaders. Then he starts talking to those that are followers. You're a bad leader if no one follows you. So an essential component of being a leader is having a follower. He says, in the same way, you who are younger must submit yourselves to your elders. All of you clothe yourselves with humility. In other words, don't project yourself as something bigger and better than what you are. Stop, listen, and realize that you can learn from anyone and all things that are happening around you. He says, all of you clothe yourselves with humility toward one another, because God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Notice this. The elders, the leaders, he says, if you reduce how you see yourself and instead take the posture of a servant, then God will give you a crown of glory that will never fade. Then he tells basically the exact same things to the people that are younger. Humble yourselves so that then God can lift you up. Cast all your anxiety on him, something that pulls you down, because he cares for you. Notice what he's doing. He's giving instructions for the leaders, instructions for the followers. Why? Because Peter understands that we are in a war. That every single day, whether you are a leader or a follower, you wake up and you step out onto a battlefield. And when you are on a battlefield, you better be ready. And that's what he says in verse 8. Be alert and of sober mind. Have clear thinking. Constantly be looking around. Be aware of what is occurring around you. Why? Because your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. At the end of Peter's letter, speaking to the elders of a church and to the followers of these elders, he gives them this simple message. You are in a battlefield. Do not fall asleep on the battlefield. Be alert and be of sober mind. Do not fall asleep on the battlefield. Elders, as a good shepherd, you make sure that your sheep are vigilant. How? By going down and serving them the way Christ served you. Those of you following the elders, you need to make sure that you are vigilant. How? By humbling yourselves and listening to the elders, because they've walked this battleground before. Do not fall asleep on the battlefield. But notice also what he says in verse 8. Your enemy, the devil. He clarifies the enemy. If you forget who the enemy is on the battlefield, don't be surprised whenever you incur friendly fire. If you forget who the enemy is on the battlefield, don't be surprised whenever you are actually hurting the agenda and hurting the advancement of God's kingdom, because you're fighting like, you're fighting with, and you're fighting even using the weapons of the enemy. No, the enemy is the devil, and there's one way to destroy him: by becoming more like Christ every single day. My prayer for you this next week is that you will open your eyes to the battlefield that is happening around you. Not so then that you start to target people as if they were the enemy, but so that you live your life in such a way where every single day the prowling lion is put on guard because you are in its presence and not the opposite. I love you guys. Have a good week.